The Gallup polling group recently released new data on a very interesting subject. They have decided that the LGBTQI plus collection of viewpoints is really nothing more than an incoherent, undefinable absurdity of random political positions that really have nothing to do with each other. What they're telling us is, far from being a monolithic political force in our country, this media narrative of a group of people that share all of these commonalities, in fact, is nothing more than a man-made, artificial, special interest group. How do we approach this revelation that the whole idea of LGBTQ is in fact meaningless? What one writer called an undefinable absurdity. Gallup reports that those who identify with some category of the LGBTQ collection of letters is now at a nearly all-time high of 9.3% of our population. Now, frankly, that has almost doubled since 2020, and it's much higher than the 3.5% that goes back to 2012. But what they show in their data is that nearly all of this increase has taken place among the youngest generation among us, demonstrating that this is more a social ideological contagion rather than something that actually exists in objective reality. In other words, it's not unfair to question what this collection of letters even means. The evidence shows that the young people are seizing different categories within the LGBTQ label to sort of do what teenagers have always done in every generation, which is assert their supposed independence by acting in ways and holding positions that are rivals to what they see from their parents and other authorities in their lives. In the 60s, it was long hair. It was wild clothing. In every generation, there's some expression of teenagers who are sort of rebelling against the normative legacy that they're being handed. The question really is, for this generation, why be a normie, as they call it, when you can choose one of these exotic identifications and promote yourself as being unique? It's really fascinating from a parent and grandparent perspective because every generation of teenagers works very hard to express their individuality. And they express their individuality by picking a group and trying to be exactly like everybody in the group. Well, young people today are increasingly using this imprecise identification of LGBTQ for reasons that are not related to actual behavior, because while the statistics show are now peaking at over 9% of people who identify as LGBTQ, the numbers are much smaller. The data is much less for those who actually practice sexual behaviors that would qualify for LGBTQ. In other words, our young generation is claiming an identity for shock value, for rebellious purposes, but they're not actually living a lifestyle that's marked by the behaviors of that so-called identity. So, the numbers of how many people in this country are now LGBTQ is a totally man-made, sort of propaganda-driven piece of information used to promote this idea that it is an increasingly normal and prevalent part of our culture, when in fact it's not. There has been a slight increase in the last generation in same-sex behavior, but overall, the LGBTQ identity is mostly just that, an identity void of actual committed practices. Even Bill Maher, the leftist political commentator on HBO, has skewered this whole idea of LGBTQ identity by looking at the statistics and sort of with a wry tone of voice, he said, if we follow this trajectory, we'll all be gay by 2054. See, even he recognizes that this is baloney. It's all performance art. We're not increasingly moving into LGBTQ behavior. We're simply asserting a desire to be something outside the ordinary. It is a natural yearning of human nature to want to be distinct, to want to have meaning, to want to be recognized as somebody important. And in our culture, driven by political activism, by social ideologies, by media propaganda, this seems to be, especially for our teenagers, this seems to be the easiest path toward significance and individuality. They've been told their whole lives that they can literally define their own reality. And so it has become trendy to challenge norms by doing something shocking, even though they're not actually doing anything shocking. There is a homosexual activist by the name of Douglas Murray. Murray is a British writer who has recently published a book called The Madness of Crowds. In his book, The Madness of Crowds, he critiques this whole collection of LGBTQ identities as an absurd fiction. In fact, this is a quote from his book. He says, LGBT is now one of the groupings which mainstream politicians routinely speak about and to, as if they actually exist like a racial or religious community. It is a form of absurdity, for even on its own terms, this composition is wildly unsustainable and contradictory. Why would he say that? He says those who claim the various letters never actually find themselves in the same communal spaces because they have nothing in common. The LGBTQ, quote, community is a vast fiction. The L's, the lesbians, are suspect of the G's, the gays or the homosexuals. The G's have a machismo and a promiscuity that the L's find disturbing. Both the L's and the G's suspect the B's, the bisexuals, as people who seem to be refusing to actually pick a side, and the T's, the transgenders, are confusing all the categories. After all, the L's and the G's are nearly as clear about what a man and a woman is as conservative Christians are. Now, they disagree about what the purpose of that gender is, but homosexual men and lesbian women, by and large, understand what a man is and what a woman is. So this bizarre LGBTQ ideology that refuses to define a man and a woman, that argues that there may be 70 or more different genders, even within the LGBTQ collection of socio-political groups, it has no real support. The Q's, that stands for queer, the Q's just want to tear down all polite society and, frankly, to destroy the acceptance that the L's and the G's have been fighting for years. No, the fact of the matter is LGBTQI plus is an incoherent category to even talk about. There is no such thing as a community of people who share a common reality. This is a man-made, media-driven collection of disparate positions that have no reasonable connection to each other. Really, the people behind it are those who, more than anything else, simply want an unfettered, unrestrained, unlimited sexual freedom within our culture. In other words, the people who want human beings to act like dogs in the street. Well, the transgender part of this is particularly disturbing, and research, we're told so many times from this same collection of different groups of people that we're science deniers, that if we only see two genders, we're not following the science. Well, let's talk about following the science. The Cass report is a British study that was released in the United Kingdom as a thorough scientific review of the issue of medical transitioning and, quote, gender-affirming care for minors. It shows that there is no good evidence in favor of medically transitioning children from one gender to another. In fact, the report was so influential that the United Kingdom has actually begun the process of changing their laws and outlawing much of the medical industry's work in this area of puberty-blocking chemicals and drugs leading to surgery and bodily mutilation for minors. The United Kingdom is moving away from this because the research from the Cass report has been unassailable. Now, critics have attacked the report from 1,000 different directions. It's homophobic, it's biased, it's blah, blah, blah. But what they haven't done is they haven't shown any significant challenge to the scientific method used or the conclusions that are drawn. The Cass report is therefore an existential threat to transgender ideology and to the multi-billion-dollar industry that has developed around that ideology. That's why trans activists are so desperate to discredit Dr. Cass's conclusions. Listen, medicine is supposed to have as its goal the good of the patient. Medicine is supposed to deploy the skill and knowledge that we have accumulated over the generations of human history for the purpose of making human life better. The first part of the Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm. But in order for medicine to promote human good, doctors have to have an understanding of human nature so they can identify what constitutes human good. Good medicine depends upon a normative understanding of who we are as human beings, a clear anthropology, an understanding of what is good and healthy for us as humans and what is abnormal and unhealthy. Instead of the good of the patient, based on a right understanding of human nature, the transgender ideology seeks to deal with wish fulfillment for the patient, regardless of how unhealthy or disordered that wish may be. The push to keep transitioning children despite the lack of evidence is actually a lack of love, a lack of the good, and an absence of following the science. Well, hopefully, in this one respect, we will follow in the footsteps of the United Kingdom because we are beginning to see pushback here. The governor of Iowa, a Republican governor by the name of Kim Reynolds, recently signed a law to remove pre-existing legal protections for individuals based on so-called gender identity and to legally return the laws of Iowa to a clear definition of the terms male and female. Now, of course, LGBTQ activists have lost their minds. It's the most horrible thing ever. We're all sort of kind of immune now to the outrage that is perpetually presented for every little thing that happens. But the reality is we are returning to a bit of common sense because we are actually doing what the progressives have been screaming at us for so long, which is we are following the science, and the science is not on their side. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, it says this about Jesus. Seeing the people, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. Let me suggest that as Christians, our response to this particular issue, the absurdity of LGBTQ ideas, particularly the transgender ideology and the legal pushes for these kinds of bizarre, unholy treatments, we need to fight against the activists who have set their minds on destroying the lives of people through bodily mutilation. But for those people who are subjected to that kind of mental distress, gender dysphoria, the mental illnesses that produce this sort of confused idea about their own bodies. Like Jesus, we need to look at them not as enemies, but we need to see them as sheep that have no shepherd, no one to love them and guide them, no one to walk with them and help them see who God intends for them to be, what a good plan He has in there for their lives. We must be a people in the political realm who dig in our feet and fight the political battles. But in the community realm, in the sociological realm, we need to be a people of compassion who come alongside hurting and confused and mentally unstable people, and we need to show them the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. God loves you. God made a way for you to be whole, to be restored. He has a good plan for you, a future that involves hope. Let us be, in the political realm, let us be fierce fighters. But with individuals who suffer these issues, let us not see them as enemies, but let us have compassion on them as people who need to discover what we have discovered, and that is that God is good. He loves us. He has a plan for us. Let us be that people in this debate. This is Truth Currents.